How have the mighty fallen and the weapon of the war gone to waste? Really interesting. I understand the beginning of the passage. David HaMelech make a eulogy about the fallen soldiers, about the fallen Giborim, Shaul and Yonatan. But honestly, who care about the weapons? We care about the weapons, but when you're talking about the fallens, you care about the weapons? V'yovdu klei milchama? So the Malbim explained that because the soldiers died, no one can use the weapon, so the weapon gets waste. But it's still not clear who care about the weapons. So I found Radak that said, Vayovdu klei milchama, it means Shaul veYonatan, shayu klei milchamtan shel Israel. What is Vayovdu klei milchama? It's Shaul veYonatan themselves. And David HaMelech called them klei milchamtan shel Israel. Fine, but I never understand what is mean klei milchamtan shel Israel. What does it mean that you call in the soldiers, the fallen soldiers, the fallen already Shaul veYonatan, klei milchamtan shel Israel? So I think the answer is in Midrash in our Parashat Hashavua, Parashat Emor. The Midrash say the follow. The Midrash talking about Shaul HaMelech before he going to his finals battle against Plishtim. The Krav that he died there and fallen there. And Shaul HaMelech was scared. And as we know, Sefer Shmuel telling us that he was so scared that he go to Baal Atov and he asked her to bring Shmuel HaNavi because he wanted to talk with Shmuel HaNavi that was died already. And the Navi telling us that Shmuel HaNavi told Shaul HaMelech, you are going to die on this battle. But the Navi didn't tell us the entire conversation between Shmuel and Shaul. Shmuel that come from the heaven, and Shaul before the last battle in Plishtim, with Plishtim. But the Midrash giving us a full conversation. So I'm not going to read you the entire Midrash, just a few lines. Say the Midrash, Amar lei ve'in mi'arak. When Shaul HaMelech heard that Shmuel HaNavi telling him, you are going to die in the battle with your son, ask Shaul HaMelech at Shmuel HaNavi, can I escape? Can I run away? Can I arrange my suitcase, take the first flight, going to Florida? Amar lei, אם ערקת את משתזיף, ואם את מקבל עליך מידת הדין, מחר אתה ובניך עמי. מה עמי אמר רבי יוחנן? עמי במחיצתי. Say the Midrash, אמר לו Shmuel HaNavi told him, yes, you can run away. You can save yourself. Arrange suitcase, take the flight, go back. But if you are going to the battle, you are going to die. You and your son, on Kiddush Hashem, you are going to be imi b'mechitzati in the Eden, in Gan Eden. Say the Midrash, and everyone knows what he did. Everyone knows what he did. He went to the battle. Say the Midrash, אמר ריש לקיש, באותה שעה קרא הקדוש ברוך הוא למלאכי השרת ואמר להם, בואו ובריאה שבראתי בעולמי. It's a Midrash in our Parashat Hashavua. Said Rish Lakish at that minute, that moment, that Shaul decided to go to the battle, even that he realized that he's going to die, called HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Pamalia Shel Malat, and told them, come and see. What's I creating my words? Who is my sons? בנוהג שבעולם אדם הולך לבית המשתה אינו מוליך בניו עמו, וזה יוצא למלחמה, ויודע שנהרג, ונוטל בניו עמו, ושמח על מידת הדין שפוגעת בו. Normally, a person is so afraid about his kids that he's not taking his kids to any place that it's a small, slight danger could be. And this father, Shaul HaMelech, know that he's going to the battle with his son, and they are going to die. And he's taking his sons to the battle. ושמח על מידת הדין שפוגעת בו. And he's happy that he can sacrifice his life to defend his country, to defend Am Yisrael, al Kiddush Hashem. ראו בריאה שבראתי בעולמי. I think that's a pshat כלי מלחמה. You know what these people that consider weapons? What does it mean that Shaul v'Yonatan are כלי מלחמה? That it's mean that they're ready to sacrifice everything that they have, their life of their kids, for only one thing. להילחם מלחמות השם. That's it. I want to tell you, after the last few months, and all this story that we heard that I don't want to start to mention, because who am I mentioning, you know? Our friends here, Rafi Asuli, that I sat in his Shiva on his son Yehoshua, and read the letter that Yehoshua sent him. And he said in his letter, Daddy, you need to know that I wasn't need to go today, because he was in vacation when we went back to Gaza. But I'm happy that I decided to go. And if you read my letter and you know that I'm died, you need to know that I'm happy to be Moser Nefesh for Klal Yisrael. How many stories you heard like this in the last few months? And I'm telling you, I have no doubt in my mind that HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Pamalia Shel Mala tell them, wow, it's not only Shaul HaMelech. ראו בריאה שברתי בעולמי. Every hero from the last few months of חללי חרבות ברזל come to the heaven and Pamalia Shel Mala telling ראו בריאה שברתי בעולמי. That's our Yom HaZikaron. That's where יאבדו כלי מלחמה. That's where יאבדו כלי מלחמה. And that's what David HaMelech cried and said, איך נפלו גיבורים. But I want to tell you something else. I want to start with a story. Last summer, I was lucky to be in Milan. In the Jewish school of Milan, they planted a tree. לזכר הנופלים במערכות ישראל. Okay? I was invited to the ceremony, and at the ceremony, I met my neighbors. What does it mean, my neighbors? My parents' neighbor. Nisim v'Chefzi Bachovav. Okay? Nisim v'Chefzi Bachovav lost their son, Ariel, 22 years ago, in a battle in Binyamin against Mechablim. Okay? He was sitting there in the tekes. I started to talk with them. They are my parents' neighbors. And I asked them, oh, you still coming to this type of tkasim all over the world? They told me, Nisim Chobav, something unbelievable. He said, you need to know, 22 years after that, we never forgot for a second. We just behave like we forgot. We send our kids, we send our grandchildren to the army. We continue to build Eretz Israel. They live in the Shomron. They continue to do everything. But it's never left us. Every night that we are going to sleep, we think about Ariel. So we need at least once a year to do something to show the universe that we not forgot. The fact that we act normally and continue to build this country, it's not because we forgot. So we came here to Milan to plant this tree. So I was invited to speak at the ceremony. So I told them what I want to tell you now. I told them, we're always thinking, what's Mekadesh Eretz Israel? Beit HaMikdash, Shechina, the fallen soldiers. But there's a beautiful Rashbam in Parshat Achrimot. The Rashbam in Parshat Achrimot on the Pasuk. ויאמר משה אל אהרון הוא אשר דיבר השם לאמור בקרובי אקדש ועל פני כל העם אכבד וידום אהרון say the Rashbam. You know what Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron after his two sons died? He said HaKadosh Baruch Hu want to be Mekadesh this place, this Mishkan. And you know by what he want to be Mekadesh this Mishkan? So everyone thinking, by Nadav Avihu that died. Say the Rashbam, no way. It's by you, Aaron HaKohen. By you, Aaron HaKohen, that lost his two kids and can continue to do the service for Klal Yisrael. That's the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekadesh the Mishkan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekadesh the Mishkan by the families that lost their kids but continue to live their life and to send their arches, their kids and their grandchildren to the army and continue to build this country and continue and understand what the Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch said in our Parashat HaShavua. When Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch talking about the mitzvah, V'seret lo titnu benafshechem, the fact that you are not allowed to scratch on your body for a dead person, asking Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, but we have a halacha in Judaism of kriya that it's obligation to do. So what's the difference? Why kriya you need to do, and seret you're not allowed to do? Says Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, you know what's the difference? Kriya, it's bachitzoniut. It's what surrounded you. What is surrounded you, it's a kriya. But your inner body, inner soul, continue as usual. And continue to bring the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the world. The Jews know to continue to live their life, and to continue to build, and to continue to believe in this country, and to believe in this Geulah, after the lost Giborei Israel Klei Milchama. That's what brings Kedusha to this country. So on this Yom HaZikaron, when we are surrounded by so many families here in the area, Mishpachat Arli, a few families in my neighborhood in Bet Shemesh, so many people surrounding us. I took a ride today to the shul, one of the Olim Chadashim in my community, and he said he never thought that few years after he came to Eretz Israel, it would be Yom HaZikaron, that he know families of fallen soldiers, you know? It was also only the Israelis always know them. And I know them also. So we know this family. And we need to tell them in this Yom HaZikaron that we know also that Kedushat Haaretz is because of that. Kedushat Haaretz is because their Gvura to continue to carry the torch of Geulat Israel even after they lost their Klei Milchama. Yehi Zichram Baruch, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu give a lot of strength to the families, and Mirzi Hashem to all of us, La'amshich Baderech, to continue the way, the path to the Geulah Shlema. I want to ask Rav Noam to talk with us about one of the fallen soldiers.
Chagai, Bishop Noam Raviv. I want to thank Chagai because when I knew I wanted to speak to the yeshiva, I knew I wanted to speak about one of the many people that I knew who fallen recently, or a friend who, it's almost 10 years since he fell in Suketan, Dar Gobi. And I was sitting in bed, laying in bed last night, unable to fall asleep, trying to think about what to and who to speak about, and I couldn't gather my thoughts, and I just gathered my thoughts because of B'zchut Rav Chagai. So thank you, Rav Chagai. I remember growing up in Chutz La'aretz, and Yom HaZikaron was kind of like the day you had to go through in order to get to Yom HaTzmaut. It's very hard to connect. The farther you are away from something, the harder it is to connect to it. And when you come here and you start living the life of your Jewish life in Eretz Yisrael, you start to connect. And part of what that means, especially when you serve in the army, is you lose people who are near and dear to your heart. When I was in Gaza, I was very disconnected from everything that happened outside. Kind of felt like the world moved on in the 3 months I was initially in Miluim, and a lot happened then. A lot happened that impacted my life, the lives of everyone around me, and the lives of Am Yisrael. And we lost one of our brothers in arms in our pluga, Raz Abulafia, and seeing him being carried away from a field of battle will always stay with me. But I want to talk to you about what happened when I came home. First time I got out of Gaza, second time I got out of Gaza. I went home and I found out about one of my neighbors, Uri Amash, who was killed. We've been living in our community for, at that point, about a year and a half. And All the faces in the community are familiar to me at that point. I pretty much know everybody's names. I'm davening with them. Uriah was always a very quiet person. Impeccable midah. And because of that, not everybody was the closest to him. It's hard to get close to somebody who was very quiet. And after he was killed, and I came back and I found out that my neighbor, two houses down, 43 years old, father of 6, who was exempt from reserve duty. His wife started putting out putting out things that he had written, conversations that they had had. Chagai was just speaking about Mesirat Nefesh of the families, Mesirat Nefesh of the individuals. And that was so eloquently expressed by Uriah. I want to share a couple of things that he said or that he wrote before he fell in battle. On his first time out of Gaza, before he fell, this was only about a week and a half before he fell, he was speaking to his wife, Avital. And there was a big discussion, and there still is, when to use reserve soldiers, when to use Sadir, the people in their active service, the younger guys, the ones who don't have families. Is it fair to put only the young on the line? Well, if you look at it from a purely just technical level, okay, what are the effects of someone who falls? If it's someone 18, 19 years old, they haven't built a family yet, they don't have children, there's less of an impact, financial and personal. There's the families, and that's not to diminish that in any way. And so a lot of people are like, okay, it's more, you got to put the younger guys on the front lines. Uriah said to his wife, he said, I disagree. We've built our life. We have children. There's a next generation. They haven't had the opportunity yet. It's my turn. It's our turn. They didn't know that he was going to follow. Only shortly after. He wrote, pull this up. He would write down his thoughts. He wrote the following in a essay he wrote. Certainly there will be those who leave. He's intending leave Eretz Yisrael. Because they're not fit for a life like this. Life of sacrifice and content. They don't understand. Life, what is it? That there is a purpose, a divine purpose to life. We don't live just to live. There's something that we need to live for. The thing that we need to live for, that is the concept of Mesirat Nefesh. To be ready to lay down your life for something. That can be in our life, to live our life b'Mesirat Nefesh. To sacrifice the things that are important to us for a more elevated divine goal. And it could be to give up your life for something more significant than it. Sometimes Siren tells the story, I hope I'm not taking away one of your stories from our Herzl, but he tells a story about Emmanuel Moreno. Emmanuel Moreno was one of the mifakdim in the most elite units within Sayeret Matkal, being one of the most elite units in the world, and then like the specialized unit there. His picture is still not allowed to be published because he was involved in too many top secret missions. And he was in a training exercise with some of his soldiers in a helicopter. He turns to one of his soldiers and says to him, if the plane's about to crash and you have 5 seconds to live, what are you going to do? I don't know. He says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Shema. And the Chayal turns to him and he says, "Look, you have 5 seconds to live, and that's what you're going to do? Like, what value does that have?" He turns to him, he says to him, "If you can't make 5 seconds meaningful, how are you going to make your entire life meaningful?" We have to know what we're going to live for. We have to know what we're going to be moser nefesh for in this world. Whether it be in our in our death or in our life. I think that we also learned this from David HaMelech. David HaMelech, it says, right, the Beit HaMikdash is called Sukkot David, or Mizmor Shir Chanukat HaBayit LeDavid. That the Beit HaMikdash is called the Beit HaMikdash. It's the Mikdash of David HaMelech. David HaMelech didn't build the Beit HaMikdash. Why is it called on his name? So Chazal Darshan on that Mizmor Lamed, in the Bamidbar Rabbah. And they say that the reason why it's called the Beit HaMikdash of David HaMelech is because he was moser nafsho for the Beit HaMikdash. Beit HaMikdash doesn't around. Is it talking about him collecting the trees, the wood, and the stones? That doesn't sound like Mesirut Nefesh. David HaMelech, it says in Divrei Hayamim, the reason why he wasn't allowed to build the Beit HaMikdash was because Shafachta Damim Larov. He spilled much blood. There's a machloket. How do we understand that? Is that a praise of David HaMelech? Is there some kind of pagam in David HaMelech that didn't allow him to build it because he spilled too much blood? Beit HaMikdash being a place of shalom. The Rambam writes that the reason why David HaMelech wasn't allowed to build the Beit HaMikdash was because he spilled so much blood, it had an effect on his neshama. It was pogem his midah. He had the midah of achzariyut, brutality. Now, what brutality was in David HaMelech? He wrote Tehillim, the most sensitive soul that you could possibly imagine. Still, it had that effect. And David HaMelech, who for his entire life wanted to build the Beit HaMikdash, wanted to be the person to do that, wanted to prepare the grounds for doing so, sacrificed himself, his midah, in order to allow the ground to be laid for the building of the Beit HaMikdash. That's Mesirut Nefesh too. So remember today, when we're going into Har Herzl, we're going to be looking at the graves of those who were Moser Nefesh. They gave their life. But also remember, those who are still here with us, who gave up of themselves, maybe their midah, maybe their mental health, maybe their loved ones, and live every day with the pain of having lost a child, a brother, a son. Medinat Yisrael is called on their names, not just on the ones who have fallen. And I want you guys to think today and appreciate the Mesirut Nefesh that has allowed this beautiful and geula, chalta de geula, to take place, and to ask yourselves, what are you willing to be moser nefesh for? Because if you don't know what you're willing to be moser nefesh for, how can you live a full life?
העמים, שוכן במרומים, אמצעי מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים, תארים וגיבורים, כזוהר כמסירים. לשמוס הקדושים שנלחמו בכל מערכות ישראל, המחתרת ובצבא הגנה לישראל, ושנפלו במלחמתו ומסרו נפשם על קדושת השם בארץ. בעבור ראשון ומתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם, וכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. יצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני ונחלתם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ושעמוד לכל ישראל זכוסם. ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ היומין ונאמר אמן.
May not really know any Torah. And that was essentially the impression that I grew up with. There's certainly many communities that continue that stigma. And I'm not certain that every single person here understands how sourced, well-sourced, the concept is of making a yontif, and it is a grand yontif. It is not a little one, and it is befitting of the greatest kavod and respect, and it is befitting that we dress up, and it is befitting that we genuinely celebrate and sing and dance. It actually does make sense. Growing up, I also never heard of some of our giants, and I think that is criable. I've mentioned in the past, when I was already, I'd been learning seriously, I would say since I was in 7th grade. I was a good boy. I went to Marish HaKollel for 3 summers. That's like real learning, like serious, from morning to night, and extra. High school, I was learning in the Masmidim Shir. I did Smicha, I did Kollel, and then I got to Eretz Yisrael. I got myself a Merkaz Rav Chavrusa, and I found out there are 2 Rav Cooks. When did that happen? I couldn't believe it. Father and son. Who would have known? I never heard that there was a second. I never learned a single piece of Torah. Never came up. Not one Mari Makom. Ever. Rav Herzog's name was never mentioned. Rav Goren, I think, was mentioned once to make fun of him. Rav Betzalel Jolti, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, Rav Zevin. Hundreds of Gedolei Yisrael first tier. Never heard of them. That's called lacking in education. The Tzioni world has a ton to offer. And what I'd like to do is give you just a tip, a taste of the beautiful Maramakomos that are involved in making Yom HaAtzmaut an absolute celebration, all out, full-fledged celebration. We cannot encompass the entirety of the subject. Every year, I turn my attention for another month to find more chidushim, more insights. And Amir Tashem, I'll put out a book, a sefer, something at the end of it. I don't know when the end of it is, but maybe we'll just touch it. And so without further ado, let's jump into some of the Maramakomos, and then we'll start playing with some of the applications to understand how amazing this is. Gemara Shabbat Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. We say, "My Chanukah." What is Chanukah? And that's a funny question to begin with. We don't say anywhere in Shas, "My Purim." We don't say, "My Pesach." And you may say, "Well, Rabbi, Purim, we've got Megillat Esther. Pesach, we've got the Torah itself. We don't need to ask anywhere, any of the other Chagim." But Nebo Chanukah doesn't have a sefer that's been included in Tanakh. So we don't know what it is. So my Chanukah. We're asking, simply put, what happened? That's a fine explanation. However, that's not the explanation that Rashi chooses. Rashi chooses a 4-word explanation of the question. What are we asking? Take a look on the left side. My Chanukah. Al Eze Nes Kavua. On which miracle was Chanukah established? Everyone knows Chanukah. There are how many miracles? 2. There's the Nes of war and Nes of the candles. There are 2 miracles. And Rashi asks, my Chanukah is a question trying to find out which one. Were we celebrating Chanukah because of the oil? Or did we establish Chanukah because of the war? That's the question. And what's the Gemara's answer?
Both.
Gemara answers only the miracle of the oil. Only talks about the oil. So from here, some of the Achronim learn out, apparently you need a revealed miracle that's so supernatural, and only a supernatural miracle justifies creating a Yom Tov. If you don't have a Nes Nigla, a supernatural miracle, just war, just a victory in war, you do not have the creation of a Yom Tov. That's how many understand this Rashi. Rashi told us how to understand this Gemara. Al Ezanes, which one? Meaning which one grants you a Yontif? Only oil. That's not a bad reading of Rashi. There's only one little problem. I'm going to set out over the next 10-15 minutes to prove to you that Rashi does not hold this way. And we're going to have to learn Rashi in another way, because that's not pshat. Take a look at the next page, Megillah, Daf Yud Daled Amud Aleph. The Gemara, okay, which Gemara were we in? Shabbos? Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. You got that? Shabbos? Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. 21b. You have to know how to quote things and where they are, because it looks good. Okay. When you're dating, you'll understand that. Okay. So on Yud Daled Amud Aleph, it says like this: 14. Hey, Ari, you got this? Megillah, which daf? 14a. And Shabbos was 21b on the bottom. Okay. Tana Rabbanon, our rabbis taught. Arba'im u'shmona neviim v'sheva neviyot nitnabu. Nitnabu lehem liyisrael. There are 48 men prophets, 7 female prophets, and they prophesied for the Jewish people. They did not add or detract from anything in the Torah, chutz mi Mikra Megillah, except for reading of the Megillah. Mikra Megillah was an addition. You got us. You're not allowed to add anything to Torah's Moshe Rabbeinu. Only that which Hashem gives Moshe Rabbeinu is Torah. You can't add anything. It's called Bal Tosef. You cannot remove anything. That's called Bal Tigra. Like saying Tchelis is not part of the Torah. That's Bal Tigra. You can have a debate. Is this it? Is this not it? But you cannot say it doesn't exist. It's it. Bal Tosef, Mikra Megillah. You can't go in it. So how did they add it? That's a good kasha. As a matter of fact, it's not so clear what the Gemara is about to do. Except that one, meaning and that one was allowed. Except that one, and whatever they explain, it wasn't really allowed, but they got away with it. What's pshat over here? So the Gemara says like this. My drush, which drasha did they use to allow this? Omar, Rabbi Chia bar Rabin, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. There's a Kal V'chomer. Is a Kal V'chomer a D'araisa or a D'rabana? In general, it's a logical understanding. A logical inference is a D'araisa in general. This one happens to be a massive debate. Maybe we'll get to it, maybe we won't. Uma me'avdut l'cheirut, from slavery to freedom. Amrin on Shira, we sing song. So mimisa l'chayim lo kol shekain. Is it not obvious that from death to life? Where did we sing Shira from slavery to freedom? Pesach. Pesach time, we sing Shira, leaving Egypt. Big debate between Rashi and the Turei Even. Which Shira are we talking about? Oz Yashir, that's what Rashi says. The Turei Even says, no, Hallel that we say in Shofra on Pesach night, or Hallel that we say in the Haggadah. Hallel on Pesach night, when we leave Egypt, that's the Hallel. Mi'avdos l'cheres. We sing Shira, leaving slavery. Who said we sing Shira from slavery? So I'm going to give you two sources how we know we sing Shira, leaving slavery. But once you know you sing Shira, leaving slavery, then don't you think it's fairly obvious that if your life is saved, no, you'll be a slave for longer. And never, that's really rough. You don't have the ability to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But guess what? If you die, you really can't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Isn't it amazing that you get to live? If you, from slavery to freedom, you sing Shira, Kal v'chomer, Dover Pashut. You sing Shira if you get to live when your life was on the line. We'll keep going. Next page. Turn to Kuf Yud Zayin. Gemara Pesachim. Anyone? 117a. Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Here is the first explanation where we learn that you sing Shira on Pesach. From slavery to freedom. Where is the source? Pesachim, Kuf Yud Zayin, Amud Aleph. So far, you're taking stock. Shabbos, Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. What was on Shabbos, Chaf Aleph Amud Bet? My Chanukah. What did Rashi say? 4 words. Al Eze Nes Kavua. Learn in the Mama Lashon. Okay? Al Eze Nes, on which language did they establish it? Some of the Achronim explain. Clearly, you need a revealed supernatural miracle, and for war, you do not set up a holiday. Then we saw Gemara in Megillah Daf, Yud Daled Amud Aleph, that when do you sing Shira? When you're saved from death. In war times, are we saved from death? No. Yeah. If in 1948 the Arabs were walking around, and my grandfather attested to it, he was here, and he said that they were walking around before saying, Ahmed, that house will be yours, and this one's mine. That car, that's going to be my wife's. They were walking around glorifying how they're going to kill every single Jew. We were saved. Saved from death. We certainly, Kal v'chomer. The Chasam Sofer actually takes this Kal v'chomer so seriously, and I've seen it now in 5 different places in Chidushei Chasam Sofer. He has Chidushim on Shulchan Aruch and Chidushim on Shas. Some of the most beautiful Torah. Really amazing Chidushim. Chidushei Chasam Sofer. Very pleasant and beautiful, and not impossible to understand. And the Chasam Sofer, I've already encountered this casually. 3 I looked up, but 2 of them, he really likes this verse so much. He includes it in all of his svarim. That this Kal v'chomer from the Gemara Megillah is a D'oraisa. And that means that Megillah reading on Purim is a D'oraisa. And Hallel on Chanukah is a D'oraisa. So then he asks, but wait a minute, everybody knows that those are the rabbinic holidays. Everyone calls them D'Rabbanan. There's a Gemara in Brachos that points out the Hallel of Chanukah is D'Rabbanan. It's Befeirosh. How can you say it's D'oraisa? The Chasam Sofer says, how to celebrate is left to the rabbis. To celebrate is D'oraisa. You have a chiyuv. And keep in mind, by the way, Rabbosai, the Chasam Sofer's whole movement and dynamic in the early 1800s was Ein Chadash Tachas HaShemesh. You cannot have anything new. Anything new is gone. You know what's really juicy in life? When you come to yeshiva, and you learn that everything that you had previously learned was wrong, especially if it was your parents. Oh, is that juicy? Oh, I am ready to come home and say, Mom and Dad, you're doing it wrong. Oh, you gotta love that. And please don't do that. Please don't do that. Get good advance prep before you go home, so you don't do that. But inside, there's not much more juicy than that. The Chasam Sofer, who was battling the effects of the Enlightenment, and Jews were no longer religious. He started a dynamic called the Yeshivish world. And every minhag that wasn't well sourced was out the window. Do you know how many customs he couldn't find good sources for that he rejected? His whole raison d'etre, his whole movement was about getting rid of anything that's not pure, classic, traditional Shulchan Aruch. It's not in the Shulchan Aruch, it's gone. And comes the Chasam Sofer and takes us to a place that I would say our primal reaction, reflex, is, ooh, that's strange. That's new. You want me to celebrate a holiday, a victory? And how shall we celebrate? Do we make this up? Do we get dressed up? That's new. If a miracle happens in your community, and now the rabbi, who just said if it's not well sourced, you get rid of it, stands up at the bima, claps and says, from now on, we're making up a holiday. Rabbi, is that well sourced? It's the same rabbi, the Chasam Sofer. Fascinating. Let's go on. Psachim, Kuf Yod Zayin, Amar Aleph, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Shir Shabbat Torah, the song that's in the Torah. Moshe v'Yisrael Amru. Moshe and Am Yisrael sang this one. Which song are we talking about? Az Yashir, very good. Isha Shalom Min Hayom, when they came up from the sea, they said this shira. V'halal zeh amro. And who made a Hallel? That's Az Yashir, but who made a Hallel?
David.
Huh? David. That's a fine possibility. Fine possibility that's gotten to in the Gemara. Yafeh. We're going to read the first possibility brought down in this Gemara. Ready? Mike, are you with me? Amru, mi amru, neviim shebeneyen. It is the prophets that were among them. There was Moshe, he was a prophet. There were other prophets, a bunch of prophets that hung around Am Yisrael, that were prophesying at that time. Neviim shebeneyen tiknu lan Yisrael. They instituted it. Sheyu omer moso, al kol perek uperek. V'al kol tzara v'tzara. Every single time, moment in Am Yisrael, which might mean every yontif, certain times, moments in Am Yisrael, v'al kol tzara v'tzara. And on every time there's suffering, there's oppression, there's worry for Am Yisrael. Shalom tova, however, chas v'shalom, shouldn't happen. L'kishenigalin, when you're redeemed from it, omrim oso al gulas, and you say it over the redemption. Your life is at stake, and you're saved. Am Yisrael is facing an existential crisis, and we're redeemed. How? Who instituted it? The Nevi'im who were around at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Rashi. Take a look at Rashi, and we'll see if my Hanukkah really conforms with the Rashi over here and what Rashi holds. Ready? Psachim Kuf Yodain on the top there with the arrow points. The Al-Kol Tzara Shalot Tavolim. First Rashi explains how to read the Chas V'Shalom. Shalot Tavo. Shouldn't happen. It's Lishna Ma'alyu, the Nokat. It's a better Lashon, a good Lashon, that it mentions Klomar, meaning to say Shem Chas V'Shalom. Chas V'Shalom Tava Tzara Lein, that it shouldn't happen that a Tzara befalls upon us. V'Yoshio, now he continues the line, V'Yoshio Mimenu. And we get saved from it. Omer Moso Al Geulasan. We say it on the Geula. Two more words in Rashi. What are those two words? Kagan Chanukah. When you're saved from oppression, tzara, like Chanukah. Is that the miracle of the oil or the miracle of the war? Which one was savior from oppression? Oil? No. War! What does Rashi hold? It's a din to say Hallel on Chanukah. Where from? From the source right here that we just learned. Gemara Pesachim, Kuf Yod Zayin, Amud Aleph. Kuf Yod Zayin, Amud Aleph in Pesachim, we learn it's a din to say Hallel whenever you're saved. Who holds of this?
Rashi.
There's an extra piece of paper that I handed out. And this is really important piece of paper. Both sides are important. So first, we've got Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah in Gemara Brachos. Al Raviv. Listen to this. Rishonim. Early Rishonim. Rabbeinu Yaakov Zal Omer. She'ikar Hallel. The main Hallel, Nitkan, was instituted called Tzara v'Tzara Shalot Tavolan. For any time there's suffering, Chas Shalom should never happen. Where's that phrase from? Psachim Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Shebeshor Shoyel Kol Yisrael Tzara. When Am Yisrael had suffering, V'Hoy HaKadosh Baruch Hu Osei Moim Nes, and Hashem does a miracle, Hayu Osim Yontif. The Rishonim say you make a Yontif. V'Yu Omrim Hallel. And you say Hallel, V'Yu Chayovin Likro L'Forech Al Kriyasan. You're chayav to say a bracha on that Hallel. Oh, that's a little strange. No, Rabbi, that doesn't feel right, naturally. Yeah, you say a bracha on the Hallel. Even if you don't finish the Hallel, even if you don't say a full Hallel, you still say a bracha. You have a chiyuv. The ikar atakona. Many discuss that can you say the whole Hallel? You do say the whole Hallel. That's not the kasha. Even if you have a minute to not say the whole Hallel, you can certainly say the whole Hallel. And the main concept of making a yontif is when the miracle happens for all of Am Yisrael, for the whole people. What's the source? And Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, B'Shem, the Rishon, Rabbi Yaakov, brings down yet another source. V'chitavo milchama ba'artzachem. When you have a war, alatzor hatzarer eschem, ba'areyosem b'chatzotzros. This is in Parshas Ba'alosma. And you blow the trumpets. V'nizkartem ufnei Hashem Elokechem, and you're remembered by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'noshatem me'oivechem, and you're saved from your enemies. What's he talking about? It's in Parshas Ba'aloscha, in the discussion when you blow trumpets and when you celebrate a Yontif. So the pasuk right after discussing you blow trumpets on Yontif is that you also blow trumpets when you go to war and you're saved. And Shatem comes the Rishonim, Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, and puts them together. When you're saved in war, you have a celebration with Hallel with the bracha. If it wasn't from the Rishonim, I would have said that sounds like a bit of a jump. But it's the Rishonim. That's for war, being saved. Who thought this was a good idea? Whenever you're saved from anything, even if it's not war, you should make a yontif. You know what it's called in halacha? It's called Purim Sheni. You know how many Purim Shenis there are? I've got no idea, but at least 90. At least 90 yontifs that Rabbanim and Kehilot made up. How do we know that there are at least 90? Because there's a guy named Dr. Yom Tov Lewinsky, a classic maskil from the Haskalah movement, and he went ahead and decided to collect Sidurim from shuls all over the world. And in the Sidurim, from hundreds and hundreds of years, you find special printed Sidurim and Gabbai Svarim in those communities. And it says in every Gabbai book and Siddur that communities would publish, over here on these days, like right before Tachanon. In this community, we skip Tachanon on this day because of this what happened here. And we also jump to Hallel, go to page number, and so he found over 90 cases. Here's a short listing. I stopped. I didn't put all 90 because they didn't fit on the page, and I didn't want to have too many pages. So these were just my favorites. But I have the Sefer at home. I'll bring it back. It's called Moadim B'Halacha, and he's got all 90 there. And they, let me tell you, Rabbosai, did not care one iota if it was in Sfira Sa'omer, Avelos, morning, you can't do this. They didn't care if it was the 9 days. They didn't care if it was Erev Tisha B'Av or Yud B'Av. They didn't care at all. Not only that, but they also didn't care if it was the day of or a different day that was more convenient. Very important to know. How many rabbis held of this? At least 90. In different centuries, in different countries, with different origins. Am Yisrael holds of this concept. When a miracle happens to you, you celebrate. There's a Purim Hitler, where Hitler was supposed to wipe out a certain community, and he got, something happened in the last minute, and the community ended up being saved, called Purim Hitler. 90 cases. That's an example of one that wasn't even such a long time ago. I'm not talking about things from thousands of years ago. Purim Tveria, Purim Casablanca, Purim Vienna. They're amazing ones. And full yontif, shaving, times of avelos, ein marvin simcha b'simcha. You'd never do it on a cholamoid. They did it on cholamoid. They did it all the time. The next is, on the other side of the page, a fantastic list. In the second Beis Hamikdash, the Rabbanim, I'm convinced, the Rabbanim there did not like Tachanun. There's a Megillah, a scroll, that goes through all the times you're not allowed to fast, you're not allowed to give a eulogy, which is very striking, not giving a eulogy. Very, very, I don't know, it rattles the soul. Asher and I have a relative that just passed away during Nisan. My uncle, Asher's grandfather, and it was in Nisan. You're not allowed to give a hesped. You're not allowed to give a hesped. My cousin said the one line, the only line that spoke about my uncle before just everyone gathered, Kaddish, and off we went to the burial. There's something that rattles you about that. The one line my cousin said is that the last thing my uncle said before he died was, Yaakov, you have to remember. And that was it. That was the end of the sentence. My uncle had dementia, and he didn't really finish sentences anymore. And he probably lost train of thought, didn't remember what he was saying to his son to remember. And my cousin said, even though Dad couldn't finish the sentence, but we knew all too well how that sentence went. Because he told it to us many, many times. He was from the German descent, the Yeki world, and it would be, remember, we're Yekis, we have customs. And keep the customs of the family. And one of the customs that he was very makbid on is if someone dies in Nisan, don't find exceptions to the rule. If I die in Nisan, don't find an exception, a way around. Don't give eulogies and speak about me. That was it. Kaddish. We went off to bury him. It means it's a yontif. If it's a yontif, you can't have eulogies talking about the dead, which I'm going to get back to in a few minutes. The same idea is true. They wrote a whole slew of times you can't have tachanun. You can't have fasting. You can't have espadin. Why? Because they're yontifs. What happened? You take a look. They're unbelievable. The Prussian, the rabbis had a debate with the Sadducees who didn't believe in their Torah Shabbat Peh. And somehow they did better PR that day, and it grabbed hold in society. They won the popular front. Everybody accepted the Yontif. They made Yamim Tovim over everything that they saw as godly. HaKadosh Baruch was involved. Hashem orchestrated these events. Yontif, sometimes 8 days, sometimes 1 day. Whenever it happened, whenever they wanted. Is it only over a miracle of war? No. Is it only something supernatural? No. Many, many things. Every single battle they went against the Greeks to liberate another piece of Eretz Yisrael. They got Beit Sha'an now, Yontif. They got Sha'arim, right? Yontif. Every single piece. You go through the list, you'll see a third of them, a quarter of them are battles. Most of them are not. They got rid of a gezeira of putting the name of Hashem in a decree, in the contracts, and Am Yisrael accepted this. They were worried Shem Hashem will be in the garbage. Yontif. You understand what's going on here? If you feel Hashem was with you, you make it Yontif. I guess I'll say over, just for those that are really following, a beautiful Netziv and an even more, I think, a beautiful Teretz. The Netziv, in his Sefer Emek Sheiltos, asks a bomb kasha on the Chasam Sofer. What did the Chasam Sofer say? The Chasam Sofer says, the Kal V'chomer from Maseches Megillah Daf Yud Dalet Amud Aleph. The Chasam Sofer says the Kal V'chomer is a D'oraisa. So it's a Din D'oraisa to celebrate on Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's a Din D'oraisa to celebrate on Yom Yerushalayim. It's a Din D'oraisa for Chanukah, for Purim. Every time you're saved, comes the Netziv. Right? Obviously, the Chasam Sofer that was just an application of the Chasam Sofer. Everyone's with me? He died in the 1800s. He wasn't talking about Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim. Okay, so the Netziv asks, this list that I just showed you of all the things that Chazal made Yomim Tovim for was actually annulled and wiped out. And the Gemara says, Batla Megillas Tainus. And Gemara Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yod Ches Amud Beis. You're not allowed to do these fasts anymore. They were annulled, except for Chanukah and Purim. They're the only two that stayed. So Chanukah and Purim, they stay, but everything else is annulled. And you can't go and add other holidays either. If these are annulled, then don't go add more. You can't add more. So how could you make a new Yom Tif? Yom Ha'atzmaut is new. Yom Yerushalayim is new. How did the rabbis go ahead and make these Purim Shanis? How do you do that? So comes the Netziv and says a bomb kasha. The Gemara says these are all annulled. The ones from Megillat Ta'anit. If it's a Kal V'chomer, Mimiso L'chaim, the D'oraisa, how did they annul them? Bomb kasha. If it's a D'oraisa to celebrate, how did Chazal overturn the D'oraisa? Rabosai, listen carefully. This kasha has been bothering me for years. And in the middle of the shir, I was going over the sources with the Chayalim just the other day. B'schut Chayalim, it just, the Rebbeinu Shalom, Heir Einai V'sechlei Zikani, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the schus to understand and insight. The list is not about our existence except for two, Chanukah and Purim. When is the Kal V'chomer a D'oraisa? When it's Mimisa L'chaim, when your life is saved. When you get a contract, no more putting Shem Hashem in contracts that end up in garbage. That's not Mimisa L'chaim. When the Perushim defeat the Tzedukim, that's not Mimisa L'chaim. When you took over an additional piece of Eretz Yisrael, it's a war, it's a war. That's not Mimisa L'chaim. There are two that are true, even at Yom HaZeh, that did not get annulled. You know why? Because they might be D'oraisa. Unbelievable. Beautiful. Weiter. What? Yeah, very important. Yad Kislev. The Rebbe got out of jail. Why did he get out of jail in Petersburg? So he says, the Balatanya writes, the reason I got him out of jail in Petersburg in Russia is because of the Zchut Eretz Yisrael v'Yoshveh. And if you don't understand that line, which most people don't, you have to read the whole Sefer Eima Banim Smecha, which you should probably all learn Be'iyam anyway. Okay. I don't have time for the Ritva, but we have to do the Yerushalmi and the Gemara Tainus. I need your attention for a few more minutes, because this is where we bring it home. So far we saw there is certainly sources to make a holiday. A holiday for all of Am Yisrael. The Gemara in Harius says that the only group called Kahal Yisrael are the Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. If you're not in Eretz Yisrael, you're not part of Kahal Yisrael. I'll go back to my grandfather. My grandfather told me that Am Yisrael in America had their heads held down. He was here, by the way, in Eretz Yisrael in the 30s. I lost one. One of my grandfather's brothers died in 1948 fighting. And one of his brothers, Baruch Hashem, lived through the war, fought and lived. My uncle Ephraim. And he lived in Herzliya. And my grandfather was able to do a visit in the 40s, but he did not stay. He ran away from the Nazis, and he couldn't bring himself to move again. It was very tumultuous, tortuous, very, very rough, and he could not bring himself to move again, the whole family. But he went ahead and made sure that he could finance every one of the children and grandchildren that made Aliyah. And Baruch Hashem, my grandfather's name is up in just about every hospital in Eretz Yisrael and every shul that the grandchildren built, of which, Baruch Hashem, there are many of them. My grandfather said that in New York and all over the Jewish world, he was a tuna wholesaler. He sold a lot of cans of tuna. And he went all around the United States, and he said, I could tell you, going around the entire United States, the Jews had their heads held down until 1948. I don't understand when people say, that was a cute miracle, 1948, for the Jews living here. It wasn't a cute miracle. That was a miracle for all of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael only have an ability to enjoy life and be alive and stop the tumult of being thrown out of lands. At least we had that ability and enjoyment. That happened only because of Eretz Yisrael, the reestablishment of the state of Israel. I have a list. I meant to print it as well. It's over 250 persecutions that we have endured in our history. And I went ahead and put it into an Excel chart so I could have fun and sort it by method of torture or oppression, or by year, or by country. Over 250 lines. 81 of them are expulsions. Let me explain what an expulsion is. Thousands die. You're on the road, moving with nothing but the clothes on your back. There are no moving trucks. You lose everything. 81 countries. How many times were we settled? Mass burnings, mass executions. 250 times. And then we hit a lull. And you have to understand that the Hakamat HaMedina is mainly the one that takes credit for that lull. In England, in Australia, in South Africa, and all over the world, the Jews have been able, until now, to live peacefully. Gemara Sota in Yerushalmi. This is precious, unbelievable. Gemara says, Ma Talmud Lomar Lemor. What is the Torah teaching us with the word Lemor? Which Lemor? The Torah says the word Lemor all over the place. Right? Hashem Moshe Lemor. However, there are two times, once in Gemara Bavli and once in Gemara Yerushalmi, that the Gemara wants to know what Lemor means. Lemor presumably is to say to somebody. But Vayidar Yaakov Neder Lemor, Yaakov was the only one standing there. So if he took a vow, who's he talking to? And Oz Yashir Moshe, Uvnei Yisrael Asashira Hazos, Lemor. Lemor, it was Moshe and Bnei Yisrael, no one else was there. It was Moshe and Bnei Yisrael, Lemor, to say to Lemi. So that's the topic of this Gemara Yerushalmi. And Oz Yashir, who are they talking to? Lemor. What is Lemor? Ma Talmud Lomar Lemor. Ma Talmud Lomar Lemor. Lemor L'darot. It means to tell us for generations to come. Machlokes of the Rishonim on the Gemara Yerushalmi. What is Lemor L'darot? To tell this idea over for generations. Option A, that just like we had a miracle, we were saved, anytime you're saved, just like we sang Shira, you sing Shira. We were saved, we sang Az Yashir. So teach the generations forever and ever that you sing Shira whenever you're saved. However, when do you sing that Shira? When you're saved. Every year on the anniversary? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We don't necessarily know that. Maybe yes, maybe no. What's another possibility of Lemor Lidarot? To tell this over to the generations. The other possibility is just like we sang Az Yashir, tell your children and grandchildren to sing Az Yashir. But then from Lemor, we would know to sing Az Yashir forever, but we don't know any miracle that happens to you. Those are the two possibilities. Sing Az Yashir forever, to remember Kriyat Yamsuf and getting out of Egypt, or whenever you experience a miracle, then you should celebrate. When? When it happened. Take a look quickly. Pnei Moshe, on the right side of the Gemara Yerushalmi. Lemor L'Dorot she'yazkiru tamid b'kol yom et hashira hazot. That you should mention all the time this Shira, Az Yashir. Take a look at the Karban Ha'eda on the left side. She'yazkiru tamid, it's the same as the Pnei Moshe at first. And then in the middle, Aleph Nun, Inami, or She'yomru Shira, Al Kol Nes She'yasalem. Every time a miracle happens to you, sing Shira. So either Az Yashir forever, or when the miracle happens to you, when the miracle happens to you, you sing Shira. Those are the options. What about when a miracle happens to you, sing Shira, and on the anniversary every year thereafter? Is that a teaching yet? Take a look now at our final source. Tainus, Yud Dalet Amud Beis. Sorry, Chav Ches Amud Beis. Tainus. Shitas Rashi. We're going to go back. There's something called the Ma'amados, Mishmaris and Ma'amados, when Kohanim and Leviim and even Yisraelim would go to offer the Avodah on the Beis HaMikdash. As a matter of fact, the concept of Mishmar, Thursday night, they would go to Maras HaMachpelah in Hebron and start with Tefillah Thursday night there, and then march to Yerushalayim in order to go and replace the old guard and become the new guard, the Kohanim and Leviim, Yisraelim, that would be in charge of that week. And we divided everybody into 24 parts. Everybody represented a week, twice a year. Fine, the Mishmaros and Ma'amados. And on the Ma'amados, there's certain very intense tefillot, and those people also fast. So does anything ever happen that pushes off the fasting or the extra tefillot of the Ma'amados? So the Gemara says, yes, there is. And listen to this story, a well-known story. Chav Ches Amud Beis, Koach, Tanis, Meseches Tanis, Daf Koach. Rav Ikla LeBavel, Rav enters Bavel. Chazino, and he saw the Kakaro Alayla B'Reish Yacha, and they were saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. He doesn't understand. Savarlav Sakino. What are you doing Hallel on Rosh Chodesh? That's not a Moed. It's not a Perek Uperek. That's not one of the times we say Hallel. Why are you saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh? So he thought he'd stop them. Kaven the Chaza. But then he saw the Kamedalga Delugai. They were skipping around, meaning they skipped 2 paragraphs. They do what we call a half Hallel. Not really half, it's like they chop off about a quarter. That piece that they skipped. Omar Shmami no Minag Arasayim Bidayo. It must be Minag. Oh, Hashem. He's now all content. It's a Minag. Go ahead, say your Hallel. What was he thinking? And what was the teretz? What's going on here? That's another shir. Do you say bracha on a halal of a minhag? Which minhagim get to stay? Which minhagim don't get to stay? That's a separate shir. Listen carefully to this Rashi, because everybody wants to know. Rashi said, "Al eiza nes kavua." You only establish miracles if it was a supernatural miracle. Yeah, which we already showed. Rashi doesn't actually hold that. But here, just in case you're unsure, Rashi makes it crystal clear. Tainus Daf Koach Chav Ches Amud Beis Minhag Avasayim Bidayo. It's a minhag of their fathers in their hands. Aval Hal de Chanukah Rabosai. We're talking about Rosh Chodesh pushes off the Ma'amados, but not Hal and Chanukah. Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, that's what we're talking about in the Gemara. But Rabbos say Hallel on Chanukah is Bechlal. That's not minhag. That's not minhag. That's a din. Look what Rashi says. Kigon be'echad b'teves. You know, like on Rosh Chodesh, Teves, when Chanukah overlaps with Rosh Chodesh. Vaday dochi. That certainly pushes off the moados. The Kevon, the Nevi'im tiknu. The Nevi'im instituted it. Shi'omer moso, I'll call perek uperek, I'll call tzara shelo tavo aleim. Gemara. Psachim. Kuf Yod Zayin Amud Aleph. The Kishen Nigolin, when you get redeemed, you omrin oso al gulasam kid oraisa dummy. It's like a dinda oraisa. A dinda, like, he didn't say it's a deoraisa, but it's like a deoraisa. Rashi! Now, let me ask you something. Hanukkah is only when Hanukkah happened, or every year? What's Rashi talking about?
Every year.
Every year. Every year saying Hallel on Hanukkah is kid deoraisa. What does Rashi think? When do you sing Shira? Whenever there's a miracle of salvation, you sing Shira. Leimur Lidarot, when it happened and on the anniversary. Who says? The Nevi'im. That's Pshat in the Gemara Psachim. Rashi does not hold what we started out thinking. There are 3 versions of Yom HaAtzmaut. Those that celebrate with Hallel without a bracha, those that celebrate with Hallel with a bracha, and those that don't celebrate. Some cynically even call it Yom HaAtzmaut, the day of dry bones, day of death. That is very cynical, and it's inappropriate. We say a bracha on bread that seemingly is untrue. What bracha do we say on bread? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That the ground, Hashem brought forth bread from the ground. I have yet to see a bread tree grow from the ground. And that's what we do every Friday night. My wife, she made sure some farmer grew some wheat. She made sure that somebody then harvested it, made sure it got sifted. It ended up in the supermarket. Baruch Hashem, I had enough money for the 4 shekel to buy the bag of flour. And I brought it home, and my wife then sat over it with love, and 4 hours later, we have these beautiful, wonderful challahs. And my wife took care of everything. And now it's sitting on my plate, and I pick it up, and I say, wife, watch this. Thank you, Hashem, for putting the bread out of the ground on my plate. My wife had nothing to do with it. And you know how we could say that? Because we could recognize that that bread didn't grow from the ground, but Hashem orchestrated every single piece of that. That whole journey from the farm to my plate, the Rebbeinu Shalom orchestrated every single piece of it. A Jew is meant to be able to see Yad Hashem. And if you cannot see Yad Hashem at all, you could see and learn history, a little bit of history, about 1948. And you can say, the bread, that was Hashem. The modern state of Israel, no way. I think that means if you're a rabbi, you've just forfeited your smicha. Impossible. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought Am Yisrael back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's been crying over Am Yisrael, wanting us back here. 23rd day of Sivan. What happened famously on the 23rd day of Sivan? I'll give you a hint. Megillah story. Purim. Not a very good hint. Most people still don't know. 23rd day of Sivan. 23rd day of Sivan. Good guess. The Jews went dancing through the streets. You know when? When Mordechai successfully got a letter out to the Jewish people. You can now defend yourselves. We can defend ourselves? Party! The 23rd day of Sivan, an unknown date. People aren't aware of this. Wait, in another 9 months, is going to be the 13th of Adar. You're going to go to battle against the Persians. You may die. What are you celebrating? And in 1948, after the famous announcement where we accept the statehood, everybody partied. We tried to delay it, and the deadline was Shabbos. The minute after announcing it, we were going to go to war. And we didn't want to, David Ben-Gurion had the sensitivity, don't declare the state of Israel on Shabbos. So that's the end, push off war a day, it's worth it on Shabbos to push off war a little bit more. We're not going to declare the state of Israel on Shabbos. And so they did it before Shabbos and sent 200 private invitations. And in each one it says, this is a secret, don't tell anybody. So it doesn't leak and get out into the international world that we declare ourselves a state. But 200 Jews told secretly. The Philharmonic was on the roof ready. The news reporters were there. Thousands were there. And what happened? Everyone was dancing, knowing we're going to war tomorrow. What are you doing? You're going to die. Why are you going? You know why? Because when you see Yad Hashem with you, I know we're going to win. The night before the declaration of the State of Israel, Thursday night, David Ben-Gurion got his hands on the oldest text of Tanakh that is in existence. One of the pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls ended up in David Ben-Gurion's hands the night before the declaration. And he said, this has got to be providential. This is providence. I have to admit that the night before we're going to declare the state. That's big. That's a sign. If that's a sign, then the fact that we're here and have more Jews in Eretz Yisrael than ever before in Am Yisrael, that's a miracle. The fact that no one could explain every single battle and every single nation that surrounds us, and tiny little Eretz Yisrael wins again and again, and we're here. And all HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants is us to come home and to represent him and be here in his land. In the midst of war, you have to understand something really important. We celebrate because this is our land and we're back. About 10 years ago, we had a Leva Torah choir singing 2 or 3 songs between, every year we've had this, but 10 years ago the following thing happened. Raviv, a giant in Torah, was here for Mishkan Shiloh, and then he came for that little Mavar to speak on Leil Yom HaAtzmaut. And he was here for the songs. 2 slow songs, sad and choice, because, it's still Yom HaZikaron. We didn't yet get to the Yom HaAtzmaut celebration. Rav Luz, one of the giants of the Dati Lumi world, he says, whoever chose those songs was wrong. Bad choice. He said, because in 1973, when we were in the middle of war, there was a decision made by someone, we're not going to have funerals for those that fall in battle. They bury them, but no funeral, no eulogy. Just bury them fast and get back, because you're in the middle of war. And he said, we're in the middle of a war of 75 years. There's no time to bring the morale of the Jewish people down. You have to know that you're in the middle of a war, and Am Yisrael is on the rise, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants his people back here, and we have what to celebrate, to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything he's given us. You have to be able to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Are there problems? There are problems, many problems. So famously, people asked Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cohen Cook, what happens when there are problems? So he said, when a father passes away and there's an inheritance, the father passed away, you say Baruch Dayan Emes. You got an inheritance, you say Baruch Hatov HaMeitiv. 2 separate brachot. You have to be able to respect both, to memorialize both. The Rambam was on a boat and was shipwrecked. He and his brother fell into the sea with hundreds of others. His brother died, and the Rambam miraculously lived. And the Rambam writes, that day was the yahrzeit of his brother. The next day he made a yontif every year of his life because he lived. Baruch Hashem, we're going to get to celebrate. And it's an amazing celebration. It is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm bringing my Yidden back. One last story that's really important. The story of Ema Banim Smecha. It's a must-tell. Rav Teichtel was a Rav in a town in Europe. The Nazis came and said any of the single girls are going to be taken. He was in Slovakia, and the Nazis were going to come and take all of them. And there was a big eruption, because they had 2-3 days notice. There was a big eruption in the Kehillah. Should we try to run away and get our daughters to safety, or should we stay put, because it's more dangerous if you run, and if you get caught, it's an even worse decree that will befall upon you. So Rav Teichtel says, at the end of his second introduction, there's a story that happened in my community. And this is the reason why he named the book Ema Banim Smecha. The mother of children is happy. There was a woman in my community, he writes, that decided that her husband should run away with the 2 daughters. And he'll send a telegram notice that he got to safety when he crosses the border. It was Pesach, and they ran. They fled through the forest. And as they got so near the border, just a few steps away, the Nazis caught them and threw them into an underground prison. The mother was told by the Nazis for a little bit of psychological terror, we caught your husband and daughters and we're going to execute them. And they were waiting to find out what was going to happen to them. And the Gaon, one of the Dayanim of the town, named Rav Unger, Zechron Tzadik Levracha, went and collected money, a crazy amount of money, and was able to ransom them. And they got to go back home. And they also even got to go elsewhere, leave town. And Rav Teichtel writes, the mother found out when they were going to be coming home, and the children and husband were coming back. The mother was waiting outside, waiting with yearning eyes. Are they coming? Are they coming? Where are they coming? And when she saw them, they ran at each other, and she couldn't hold in the cry and the tear, the joy, the tears of joy. And they embraced, and he writes, anyone who did not witness that embrace has never seen real joy in this lifetime. And then he concludes, and that's why I called the Sefer Ema Banim Smecha, the mother of the children is happy. And Ad Kan, until here, is what I know about this story. And I called it Ema Banim Smecha because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is yearning. The wrinkles of the wall of the kotel of old age, the growth of those slough that grow out of the wall, the teardrops. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has just been waiting, crying, waiting for us to reunite with her. And then the last 3 pages Rav Teichtel wrote. He got a copy of his book, and he hand wrote just a little bit more before it was the final rendition. And he sent it with his son Avram, who managed to get there and print it fully. The last words Rav Teichtel wrote. That story I wrote about in the end of the second introduction, that was me and my daughters. Kodesh Baruch was so happy to bring us back. He did crazy miracles, some of the craziest miracles ever in history. We are going to celebrate and thank the Rebbeinu Shalom.